Welcome to This Week in Christian History, a podcast from the Center for Christian History at Mississippi College. The Center for Christian History is dedicated to expanding knowledge and understanding of Christian history. Our mission is to provide a scholarly, unbiased look at the events, figures, and movements that have shaped Christianity over the centuries. You can visit centerforchristianhistory.com for daily historical highlights. And each week on this podcast, we'll do a deep dive into key moments with Christian history's leading authorities. We are pleased to have the Christian History Institute sponsor this episode of the podcast. Find free resources and subscribe to their magazine at christianhistoryinstitute.org. Our first historical highlight of the week is the salvation of John Newton. On March 10th, 1748, the writer of the beloved Amazing Grace became a Christian. He later said of his acceptance of Christ, quote, "That 10th of March is a day much to be remembered by me, and I have never allowed it to pass unnoticed since the year 1748. For on that day, the Lord came from on high and delivered me out of deep waters." End quote. Our next historical highlight is the approval of the sale of indulgences. On March 15th, 1517, Pope Leo X officially approved the sale of indulgences within the Catholic Church. The construction of St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican had far exceeded its budget, and the Pope's financial advisor suggested the idea of selling indulgences that would help repentant sinners escape purgatory sooner. Eventually, a regional indulgences salesman stopped at the Castle Church in Wittenberg, Germany, and priest Martin Luther challenged the sale of these indulgences. Luther claimed that there was no scriptural basis for the practice. Thus began the Protestant Reformation. Our final historical highlight and the subject of our deep dive is John Albert Broadus. Known as the Prince of the Pulpit, John Albert Broadus was a prominent figure in the Southern Baptist community in the late 1800s. A former pastor of the Charlottesville, Virginia Baptist Church and a professor at the University of Virginia, he co-founded the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Greenville, South Carolina. The seminary has since been relocated to Louisville, Kentucky. Broadus taught at the seminary for over 30 years and served as a chaplain in Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. He died on March 16, 1895. Today in our deep dive, Nick Walters, director of the Center for Christian History, talks with Eric Smith of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary about John Albert Broadus.
Hey, welcome back to another great deep dive that we have on This Week in Christian History. And our particular episode today is centered around March 16th in 1895, one of the very early leaders in Southern Baptist history, and certainly within the world of Southern Baptist Seminary education, died, who was Dr. John Albert Broadus. And we are glad to have on with us today Dr. Eric Smith, who is a professor of church history at the Southern Baptist University, how about a seminary in Louisville, Kentucky. And Dr. Smith, thank you for joining us today and lending us your brain and your time.
It's my delight. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, you are here because you are a Broadus scholar and someone who is, as I understand, is working on all kinds of material, including a book on John Broadus. And we couldn't think of anybody better to talk to about that than you. So thank you for joining us.
Well, it's truly my honor. Thank you.
Very good. Well, tell us a little bit about him and why we would be focusing on him to talk about Christian history.
Yeah, I think that Broadus is a worthy subject for your podcast. He is one of the greatest preachers of his generation, certainly among Southern Baptists, but also beyond. He was recognized by just a variety of evangelicals of his day in the mid to late 19th century in America, as well as overseas, as an expert, not only a very gifted preacher, but an expert in the field of homiletics and a teacher of preachers, He was also a very well-regarded scholar in the area of New Testament and philology. He was a textual critic and just a very sharp and gifted guy who is probably best remembered today as one of the four founding faculty members for the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, which at that time was the first Southern Baptist Seminary, and Broadus helped lay out the curriculum for that school and really gave his life to seeing it survive and thrive beyond the 19th century. So very important figure, not only to Southern Baptists, but really well beyond.
Yeah, and so the seminary today is in Kentucky, right? But didn't it start in his native land of North Carolina or South Carolina?
Yeah, great question. So the seminary touched all those southern states
Okay.
before all was said and done. It began in Greenville, South Carolina,
Okay.
for the simple reason that South Carolina Baptist gave the lion's share of the needed endowment on the front end, and Furman University, which was there in Greenville, South Carolina, donated some of its resources and books and things. And James P. Boyce, Broadus's fellow founder of the seminary, he was a South Carolina Baptist originally from Charleston. And so the seminary began in Greenville, South Carolina in 1859, and then moved to Louisville, Kentucky, 1877, for a variety of reasons. One of them just being the realities of Reconstruction and the desolation that South Carolina in particular suffered as a result of the Civil War. And so Louisville, Kentucky became a very attractive second home for the seminary. There's a huge Baptist presence there. It's kind of a thriving New South city. There was a railroad there. There's a lot of industry, and it became kind of the new home for the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. It put them in proximity to Baptists all over North America, drew students from many new places, and continues to be the home of Southern Seminary today.
How about that? And so Broadus then went with the seminary, right? I mean, so they kind of packed it all up, and along with the others, Boyce and others that hoofed it up
Yeah,
there.
that's right. And, that's just one piece of Broadus's commitment to Southern Seminary. Broadus had a very successful and fruitful calling as a pastor and as a university professor in Charlottesville, Virginia. He taught at the University of Virginia, where he was a graduate, and was also a chaplain at the University of Virginia. And he was the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Charlottesville, and was beloved across the state, was frequently invited to fill the most prestigious pulpits, not only in Virginia, but really up and down the Atlantic coast, and was really in his early 30s on the rise, set to become one of the premier preachers and pastors of his generation. But then this seminary enterprise presents itself. His friend James P. Boyce, who we've already mentioned, was the passionate leader of this cause. There'd been talk about a Southern Baptist Seminary for a couple of decades at that point, but it was really Boyce who had the vision for a seminary that was uniquely suited to the needs of Baptists, who believed, among other things, that God can call anyone to preach whom he wills. They don't necessarily have to have a classical education. They don't have to be fluent in Latin and Greek and Hebrew already before they can be called to preach. And so Boyce wanted to begin the seminary that was accessible to anyone who God called to preach, even if they just took one class in preaching or English New Testament or whatever. He wanted to just be a resource to them, while also providing a track for those called to deeper scholarship, who wanted to write the books, who wanted to be Bible translators, who wanted to go to the mission field or whatever. So it was a new, innovative kind of institution, and he and others wanted John Broadus to help design that curriculum. He was very well educated. He'd received a master's degree from the University of Virginia, most prestigious school in the South at that time, probably. And so Broadus was kind of a natural fit to consult with that. And after he designs this curriculum, they say, why don't you just serve on the founding faculty? And that was a wrenching choice for Broadus around 1858, to leave a church that he loves, to leave a very stable and promising career for a very uncertain kind of enterprise. But after a year of wrestling with it, Broadus finally says, the die is cast. I'll do it. If I've been elected by Southern Baptists, then I want to serve. And he really spends the rest of his life giving all that he's got to make that seminary survive. One of the most famous and iconic statements that Broadus ever made was right after the Civil War was over. There's a great question of whether it's wise for the seminary to reopen. People are doing their best just to hold their families together, their local churches, and then maybe their own state Baptist college. I mean, are Southern Baptists really going to give to this central seminary? And Broadus looks at his fellow colleagues and says, suppose we all quietly agree that the seminary may die, but will die first. And Broadus spends the rest of his life really keeping that commitment, doing whatever it takes to raise funds and recruit students and just raise the profile of this institution. And he probably did cut his life a little bit short in the process, like all those founding faculty members, but it stands to this day in no small part through his efforts.
How about that? What and part of your research and the things that you're learning about him, does he did he keep a journal? Did he do letters to people and things like that on just more of a personal level of what might be that pull, right? I mean, I like the academics, but the fact that you might have the skill set and the ability to live in an academic world doesn't necessarily mean that you're the type of person that's going to be a good preacher that is going to, fill the pulpits up, right? And be able to have people, I mean, or at least the pews up, if nothing else, to have people want to be able to. So that had to be a tussle for him.
Exactly right. Yeah, from the beginning of his career, he's feeling this tension between the academy and the pulpit. He begins his career, if we want to call it that, with what he came to call his double burden, but a double calling of professor of ancient languages at University of Virginia and the pastor of First Baptist Charlottesville. And really for the rest of his life, he's feeling that pull between directly serving the churches and being an evangelist and, as he would say, being directly involved in the work of saving souls versus moving into the academic world, teaching and training and more indirectly shaping the life of the church. And in fact, it was such a pull for him when the idea first presented itself that he turned it down. He was elected by the convention to serve as the founding professor of New Testament and homiletics, and he turned it down at first. His whole church petitioned him to turn it down. Half the state of Virginia seemed to rise up and tell him not to leave. And so he didn't, and he stayed in his church, but it seemed to keep gnawing at him over the course of the next several months. Some of the other electees also declined because Broadus declined, and so he kind of felt responsible for all that. And just over the course of several months of deliberation and we trust the Lord's leadership, he ends up accepting that post and really never looks back after that.
You can watch the rest of Nick's interview with Eric Smith on the Center for Christian History website at centerforchristianhistory.com. We are pleased to have the Christian History Institute sponsor this episode of the podcast. Find free resources and subscribe to their magazine at christianhistoryinstitute.org. This Week in Christian History is produced for the Center for Christian History by Blue and Gold Media at Mississippi College in cooperation with the MC Department of Communication. For episode transcripts and more information, visit centerforchristianhistory.com. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube Music, or wherever fine podcasts are found. Our next episode is coming next week. Thank you for listening.